This is a very important topic that most people are not aware of. Chronic inflammation is linked to Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases. We are going to talk about what we can do to reduce this chronic inflammation and keep our brains nice and healthy and even thrive as we age. Welcome to the Longevity Now podcast. I'm your host. Today's episode is all about reducing chronic inflammation. We're going to be talking about how it affects our brain and nervous system, what we can do to reduce it, and even thrive with it. So, chronic inflammation has been linked to many different diseases, from heart disease to diabetes to cancer to autoimmune disorders. But more recently, studies have been linking chronic inflammation to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and even ALS. And so, this is something that is really important for us to understand because a lot of people are afraid of getting old and having a decline in their cognitive abilities, their memory, their thinking, etc. And there are a few things that can actually reduce this risk of having a decline in our brain function, or decline in our memory, or having Alzheimer's. And one of those factors is chronic inflammation. So, let's get into it. One thing that can cause a decline in your brain function is something called amyloid beta accumulation. Amyloid beta is a protein that's found in our brain. And when we have normal levels of it, it's a good thing. It helps with synaptic plasticity and even neurogenesis. But when we have an overaccumulation of this amyloid beta, it starts to form these plaques in the brain, and it becomes toxic to the neurons. And that's where we start to see a decline in cognitive ability, and that's associated with Alzheimer's disease. Another thing that can happen is we have another protein called tau. And tau normally stabilizes the microtubules in our neurons, especially in the axons. But when we have too much of this protein and it gets hyperphosphorylated, then it starts to accumulate and form these tangles inside of the neuron, and that causes the neuron to become dysfunctional and eventually leads to cell death. Now, both of these proteins are affected by inflammation. In fact, there are several different pro-inflammatory cytokines that have been found to be elevated in people with Alzheimer's as compared to people without Alzheimer's disease. The question is, are these elevated levels of cytokines causing the Alzheimer's, or is it the other way around? Is the Alzheimer's causing the elevated levels of cytokines? Well, it's likely both. It's probably a combination of both. The inflammation is probably making it worse once it starts to occur, but it's not necessarily the cause of it. So, what can we do to reduce our risk of having Alzheimer's or having this decline in cognitive function due to inflammation? Well, one thing is, we need to control our diet. We want to eat a diet that is anti-inflammatory. This means eating lots of fruits and vegetables that are high in antioxidants. These antioxidants will help to reduce inflammation throughout the body and even specifically in the brain. And so, if we want to reduce our risk of developing Alzheimer's, then we want to be eating foods that are high in antioxidants. That means berries. It means leafy greens. It means nuts and seeds. All of these foods are high in antioxidants, which can help to reduce inflammation. Another thing that you can do is eat a diet that is high in omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. They compete with the omega-6 fatty acids for certain enzymes, and the omega-6 fatty acids promote inflammation. So, by reducing the amount of omega-6 fatty acids and increasing the amount of omega-3 fatty acids, we can shift the balance of those two types of fats in our bodies and reduce inflammation. And so, by doing that, we can reduce our risk of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. Another thing that you can do is exercise regularly. Exercise helps to reduce inflammation throughout the body. It helps to increase the amount of antioxidants that we have. And exercise is also good for the brain. Exercise helps to increase the amount of blood flow to the brain. It helps to increase the amount of oxygen that goes to the brain. And exercise is also neuroprotective. There was a study done a while ago in mice where they looked at the effects of physical activity on the brain. And they found that the mice that were physically active had less amyloid beta accumulation and less tau protein accumulation than the sedentary mice. And so, physically active mice had less of these proteins that are associated with Alzheimer's. And so, another thing that you can do is make sure you're getting quality sleep. Quality sleep is important for overall health, and we know that people who have sleep disorders like sleep apnea tend to have higher risks of developing dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And so, if we want to reduce our risk of these neurodegenerative diseases, then we need to be getting quality sleep. Another thing that you can do is avoid smoking. Smoking increases oxidative stress, and that can lead to an increase in inflammation. In fact, people who smoke have elevated levels of inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, and smoking is associated with an increased risk of developing Alzheimer's. Another thing you can do is limit your alcohol intake. Alcohol, when consumed in excess, can lead to an increase in inflammation. So, if we want to reduce our risk of these chronic inflammatory diseases, then we need to limit our alcohol intake and make sure we're not smoking. Other things that you can do is take a daily aspirin. There was a study done looking at people who took a daily aspirin versus those who didn't, and they found that the people who took a daily aspirin had a reduced risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. The only caveat to that is that you need to talk to your doctor before taking a daily aspirin because it does increase your risk of bleeding. And so, if you already have a bleeding risk, then taking a daily aspirin may not be the best idea. Another thing that you can do is take turmeric. Turmeric is a spice that comes from the turmeric plant, and turmeric contains curcumin. Curcumin is a very potent anti-inflammatory compound. And there are studies showing that curcumin supplementation can help to reduce inflammation throughout the body and even specifically in the brain. So, curcumin has been shown to reduce the levels of amyloid beta and tau protein, and even improve cognitive performance in animal models of Alzheimer's disease. Another supplement that you can consider is omega-3 fatty acids. If you're not getting enough omega-3s from your diet, then supplementing with omega-3s can help to reduce inflammation. And as I mentioned earlier, omega-3s can compete with the omega-6 fatty acids to help reduce inflammation. There's also some data suggesting that fasting and intermittent fasting can be beneficial for reducing inflammation. And there's even data suggesting that intermittent fasting can be neuroprotective. And then, finally, another thing that you can do is reduce your exposure to toxins. Toxins can increase oxidative stress, which can lead to an increase in inflammation. And so we want to reduce our exposure to toxins as much as possible. So, if you want to learn more about how to reduce inflammation, then I highly recommend checking out this playlist right here. I put together a bunch of videos on different ways that you can reduce inflammation and even thrive with inflammation. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Longevity Now podcast. If you did, please make sure to leave a thumbs up. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. When you subscribe, you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. And if you're on social media, you can follow me to get the latest updates as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.